Imagine the world's most dangerous man didn't want your money but your attention. At 6 p.m., every news anchor in America stopped speaking at the exact same second. Static didn't follow, just a slow, methodical smile appearing on every screen from Times Square to the smallest living room in Kansas. Most villains want to burn the city down, but he realized it was much cheaper to just buy the match factory. He didn't hack the signal. He signed the contracts. Now, the most honest man in the country is the one everyone calls a monster. The truth is finally for sale, and he's the only one with the receipt. The buyout didn't happen in a dark alley with a gun to someone's head. It happened in a glass boardroom on Wall Street with a pen and a series of anonymous shell companies. The CEOs didn't scream for help. They looked at the nine-figure valuations and asked where to sign. They thought they were selling a dying medium to a madman with too much cash. They didn't realize they were selling the only lens through which the public sees reality. The first thing he did wasn't to change the logos or the theme music. He simply walked into the main broadcast center, not in a costume, but in a tailored suit that cost more than the lead anchor's house. He didn't fire the staff. He gave them a simple choice: tell the truth or tell the truth. At exactly 7 p.m., the screens across the nation flickered for a single heartbeat. The polished, synthetic smiles of the nightly news icons suddenly vanished. Instead of the usual headlines about celebrity scandals or partisan bickering, the ticker tape at the bottom shifted. It began scrolling their real-time home addresses and private phone numbers of the lobbyists currently inside the Capitol building. The anchors sat in silence, looking directly into the lens, refusing to look away from the camera's cold, unblinking eye. For the first time in decades, there was no spin, no expert analysis, and no commercial breaks. The Joker wasn't even on camera. He was just a shadow in the control room, watching the monitors glow. He wasn't looking at the chaos he'd caused. He was looking at the audience retention data. The ratings didn't just climb. They shattered the analytics software of every major tracking firm in the world. The nation was finally watching, paralyzed by the sight of a mirror being held up to its own distorted face. But the Joker knew that showing people the truth is only the first step of the infection. The real damage starts when they realize they can't turn the screen off. The White House didn't wait for the morning edition to react. The FCC issued an emergency blackout order within 30 minutes of the first broadcast. Federal tactical teams were dispatched to every major transmission tower, expecting a firefight. They found empty buildings and humming automated servers. The Joker wasn't broadcasting from a basement or a hidden bunker. He had moved the entire infrastructure to a network of private satellites registered in international waters. You can't cut the cord when the cord is 500 miles above the atmosphere. As the government scrambled, the screens across America changed again. A countdown appeared, glowing in a cold, unclinical blue. The Truth Bounty, the text read in a simple, unadorned font. The Joker offered $10 million to any intern, assistant, or driver who could provide digital proof of a felony committed by their employer. The phone lines didn't just ring. The entire telecommunications grid shuddered under the volume of incoming calls. The Joker sat in a high-backed leather chair in a room filled with silence, watching the betrayal happen in real time. He wasn't destroying the system with high explosives. He was destroying it with greed, the very fuel the system had used to run for a century. By midnight, the first leaked recording played on every channel simultaneously. It wasn't a masked villain on the tape. It was a beloved senator laughing about a bridge project that only existed on paper. The public didn't feel the expected outrage, and they felt a sick, addictive sense of satisfaction. The Joker leaned into a microphone for the first time that night, his voice a calm, gravelly whisper. "I'm not the one who broke your trust," he murmured. "I'm just the one showing you where the cracks are." But the bounty was merely the bait for a much larger hook. As the nation cheered for the whistleblowers, the feed shifted to a global map of every active bank account. The Joker tilted his head, a thin smile touching his lips. "Now," he whispered, "let's see who's actually worth the air they breathe." The map didn't just show numbers, it showed connections. Lines of digital gold pulsed across the screen, linking offshore accounts to charitable foundations. The viewer wasn't just watching a news report anymore, they were watching a heist in progress. But the Joker wasn't the one holding the bag. He leaned forward, the blue light of 100 monitors reflecting in his calm, focused eyes. Most people think power is a skyscraper, he whispered into the silence, but it's actually just a series of permissions. Suddenly, the map zoomed in on a single, unremarkable office building in Delaware. This wasn't a bank or a government agency. It was the headquarters of the firm that managed the pensions of the very people currently trying to arrest him. The Joker revealed that their retirement savings had been used to fund the very surveillance state now hunting for his signal. The irony was thick enough to choke on. The public's own future was being sold to pay for their current chains. The tension spike hit when the government finally cut the regional power grids to silence the broadcast. Cities went dark, smartphones died, the screens went black. For 3 minutes, the nation held its breath in the cold. Then, every single digital billboard in the country roared back to life. The Joker didn't need the national grid. He had been using the independent solar arrays of the tech giants he was exposing. He wasn't just on the news anymore. He was the only light left in the dark. Then came the revelation that turned the tide. The Joker hadn't used a single cent of his own money to buy the networks. He had used the untraceable slush funds of the 3 largest political action committees in the country. He had turned the system into a snake that was finally starting to enjoy the taste of its own tail. But the real power shift wasn't in the money. It was in the choice he offered next. "I've shown you where the gold is buried," he said, a jagged edge of a laugh in his voice. "Now I'm going to let you decide who gets to keep it." The choice wasn't a vote or a survey. It was a login. Every news app on every smartphone in America received a single encrypted push notification. It contained a unique digital key to a decentralized ledger of the nation's entire tax history. The Joker didn't just give people information, he gave them the keys to the vault. He called it the People's Audit. In an instant, the system didn't just destabilize. It suffered a total cardiac arrest. The grocery store clerk could see exactly how much the local governor had spent on consulting for a highway that was never built. The veteran could see the exact line item where his healthcare budget was diverted to a drone strike halfway across the world. Joker didn't have to say a word to incite a riot. He simply provided the math, and the math was undeniable. Police departments across the country began to see their own internal disciplinary records scrolling on the jumbotrons of empty stadiums. The National Guard was mobilized, but the soldiers weren't looking at the protesters. They were looking at their own phones, seeing the records of the very politicians ordering them into the streets. The chain of command didn't just break, it evaporated in the heat of a billion screens. The Joker sat in the center of the chaos, perfectly still, peeling an orange with a small, sharp knife. He wasn't watching the fires on the news. He was watching a live feed of the Federal Reserve's emergency bunker. The most powerful men in the world were trapped inside, realizing their physical walls couldn't stop a digital truth. "Security is just a consensus," Joker whispered to the empty room, and tonight the consensus has changed. The mini twist came when the president attempted a national emergency broadcast to restore order. When the red light went on, the president's face was replaced by a live deepfake of his own confession to a scandal from a decade ago. The Joker had turned the nation's most trusted podium into a puppet theater. The government wasn't just losing control, they were losing the ability to even be heard. "They want to talk to you about order." The Joker's voice cut through the president's distorted image. "But they forgot that order is just another word for silence." He paused, the knife hovering over the orange. "And silence is a luxury none of us can afford anymore." The sirens in the distance weren't for him. They were for the system that had finally choked on its own secrets. The Joker didn't run. He sat in the center of the broadcast booth, the on-air sign glowing a soft, bleeding red. The final twist wasn't a bomb or a virus. He pulled a single, crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, the contract he had supposedly used to buy the networks. It was blank. He hadn't spent a single cent, and there were no anonymous shell companies. He had simply sent a memo to every newsroom, in the country, stating that the new owner demanded the absolute, unvarnished truth. The anchors, the writers, and the cameramen didn't check the credentials. They were so hungry for the truth that they didn't wait for permission to tell it. The fear of a madman gave them the courage to do what they had always wanted to do. The Joker hadn't bought the media, he had simply given them an excuse to be human again. The chaos that followed wasn't his masterpiece, it was ours. The elite had burned their own houses down, trying to hide from a ghost that never actually owned the deed. The Joker looked directly into the lens, his eyes reflecting a million different lives. "I didn't change the world," he whispered, his voice cracking with a strange, dark empathy. "I just stopped lying to it." The screens didn't fade to black. They stayed on, showing the faces of regular people finally looking at one another. He had given us back our eyes, but he had taken away our comfort. Now, the world has to decide if it is brave enough to keep the lights on. The last image wasn't the Joker laughing, it was him walking out of the studio, blending into the crowd. Just another face in a sea of people who finally knew too much. That's all for today. Subscribe if you're ready to question who the real villains really are.